G'day guys and gal, after years of reading, I have done it. I have read the entirety of the Horus Heresy, 64 full-length novels, which includes all the compendiums of short stories and all the novellas. I even read all the shit ones people say to skip. Rough estimates puts this at over 30,000 pages. That is a lot. Now because I am time poor and struggle to sit still, I consume this Goliath series in audiobook format. And all I gotta say is I'm not gay, but I would literally fuck Toby Longworth and Jonathan Keeble's voices. That is some god tier narration, my lord. Pretty much every spare moment I had where I could, I would listen to the series. Driving, walking, cooking, cleaning. Man, I'd even put it on during sex instead of Chris Brown or whatever wife beater the girls like to listen to these days. After finishing, I am now qualified to tell you if it was worth it, and the answer depends. Yes, I think all Warhammer fans should give it a stab. No, I don't think every book needs to be read. So today I'll guide you on which books you have to read, which ones you could probably skip, and the ones that would be good to read depending on what you like. Before we get started, some things I promote in this channel are nice to have, others are pretty essential. For me, I always need to have some sort of earbud or headphone on me so I can crunch Warhammer audiobooks as often as possible. So I'm glad to partner with Raycon for today's video to give you the same opportunity. Whether it be in the gym, on a walk, or on public transport, having some sort of earbud or listening device is essential, but they can be insanely expensive or so cheaply made that they end up breaking. Raycon shines by being well valued while maintaining the quality, having all the latest and greatest features like noise cancelling, water resistance, and many more, but without feeling like you're breaking your bank. To further prove this point, I want to highlight Raycon's new bone conduction headphones. This fancy bit of new tech allows music or audio to be exclusively heard by you without the need for anything to be in your ear. It does this via vibrating your bones. Yes, it's as cool as it sounds, and yes, it is completely safe. The advantage of this is that it allows greater awareness as you still get to use your ears. So on those walks, you'll still be able to hear your surroundings. It's also a lot less antisocial. If you want to talk to someone or seem approachable while listening to Grimaldus's epic last stand during the Siege of Hell's Reach, then this is the best option to do that. So to pick up Raycon's new bone conduction headphones or literally any of their other awesome products, click the link below or go to buyraycon.com/majorkillbc for 20% off store-wide. Cheers to Raycon for sponsoring this video. Today we'll rapidly fire through each book in the series where I provide some context on it and who should read it. Let's get into it. Okay, so it's common knowledge that the first 5 books of this series are more or less a must-read. Horus Rising is the literal start, showing off when Horus was a beloved loyalist and the sons of Horus were still the noble lunar wolves. False Gods is when shit starts to go sideways. Galaxy in Flames is when the heresy officially kicks off, with Flight of the Eisenstein and Fulgrim being more or less different perspectives on these same events. However, all of these books are so fucking good that I would say you need to read them all. Then there is The Descent of Angels, a Dark Angel focused book. I love the Dark Angels, so I enjoyed it, but the Dark Angels plotline is very much a side thing for most of the heresy, so you could skip this unless you like the Dark Angels. Legion, on the other hand, is a must-read. Yes, it's still a side plot about the Alpha Legion, but it's a very good book and explains a lot about why the Alpha Legion joined Horus despite still seeing themselves as loyalists. Battle for the Abyss is considered one of the most pointless and skippable in the entire series, but I actually quite liked it. It has Ultramarines, Space Wolves, Loyalist World Eaters, and a Loyalist Thousand Sun teaming up against traitor Wordbearers to stop a plot that, if it succeeded, would really have fucked up the Loyalists. None of the characters ever appear again, although the outcome of the book is sometimes mentioned in future books. But for me, I personally did like it, although it is very much not essential. Mechanicum, on the other hand, is a must-read. It gives you massive insight into how the Mechanicum operates, and honestly gave me goosebumps time and time again. It details the fall of Mars and why they mostly went traitor, as well as giving us some dope as hell Titan battles. With the Mechanicum being such a key part of the Horus Heresy series, you'd be doing yourself a disservice to skip this. Tales of Heresy is the first compendium of short stories we encounter. These are hard to categorize, as some short stories are way more relevant than others. I personally would read Tales of Heresy, as it has some really awesome short stories such as Blood Games and The Last Church, but the short story compendiums are really up to you. Fallen Angels is a direct sequel to Descent of Angels from the Dark Angels side plot. If you read Descent of Angels, you should read Fallen Angels. If you chose to skip Descent, then you may as well choose to skip Fallen as well, although as a Dark Angels fan, I could recommend both. A Thousand Suns is essential. It shows how the noble sons of Magnus went from the most enlightened and morally good of all the legions to degenerate traitors. Their fall was handled really well, a lot better than most of the other traitor legions, and with the fall of Prospero being such a key event in the heresy, you really can't afford to skip it. Nemesis is a dope book. A team of Imperial assassins are sent to try kill Horus. It's very different to a lot of other heresy books, as it doesn't feature much Space Marine action until the end, and I personally enjoyed it, but in terms of relevance to the overall plot, it's very skippable. If you like assassins, read it. If you don't, then skip it. The First Heretic is an absolute must, and is one of the best in the series. It somehow actually makes the Wordbearers likable, at least for a while, showing off the complexities of their beliefs, the the diversity of their belief system, and why Lorgar fell to chaos, which was the first big domino to fall and kick off the heresy to begin with. Prospero Burns is another controversial book. It details the fall of Prospero, but more so from the Space Wolves perspective. To be honest, I really enjoyed it. The author did a great job of showing off the complexities of the Space Wolves and how they are a lot more sophisticated than they appear. If you like the Space Wolves or are interested in them, then 100% read it. However, the overall plot doesn't impact the heresy much, and from a coherent lore perspective, you could skip this if your goal is to speedrun the heresy as fast as possible. Age of Darkness is another short story compendium. This one I would actually recommend, but once again the short stories are up to you at your own discretion. It helps slow down the heresy for the reader a bit as everything has been so full steam ahead, but by focusing on some of the smaller stories in between the big novels, it can help you appreciate the scale of the heresy more. Age of Darkness was also very well received by audiences. Up to you on this one. The Outcast Dead is very skippable in my opinion. The plotline of it has next to no relevance on the overall setting. It's a very self-contained story and is overall a bit mid, but it does contain Thunder Warriors and even has a cameo by Rogel Dawn and the Emperor. However, it is also the book that has the infamous Naked World Eater punching through armored custodian lore. So if you're wanting to 100% the heresy, then you'll probably enjoy it, but it's one of the most skippable for sure. Deliverance Lost is an interesting one. The Raven Guard and the Shattered Legions have an entire subplot going on that goes very in depth and makes for some amazing reading, but overall is sadly quite skippable and doesn't do much to the main plotline. By main plotline, I mean everything that directly leads to and impacts the Siege of Terra. If you like the Raven Guard, it's a must read. If you just want to power through the heresy, I'm sad to say it is skippable. What isn't skippable, however, is Know No Fear. This is easily one of the best books in the entire series and was so awesome that it made the Ultramarines go from a meme to one of the most beloved of all legions. It details their first experience of the heresy, getting ambushed by the word bearers that they thought were allies, the shock of the betrayal, Gilliman unable to believe it, and the devastation wrought. The first half of the book is gut-wrenching, but when the Ultramarines counterattack begins in the second half, holy shit. It literally sums up why you do not fuck with the Ultramarines. 10 out of 10, a must read. The Primarchs is another compendium of short stories. I would say it's good to read as it directly focuses on the various Primarchs, who are the main focal point of the heresy, and the more you connect with each Primarch, the more impactful the Siege of Terra becomes. Fear to Tread is an essential read as it shows the Blood Angels' first encounter with the heresy as they are ambushed on Cygnus Prime and fight a joint Khornat and Slaaneshi army. Sanguinius is easily one of, if not the best characters in the entire heresy, so to watch him in action is a treat. Shadows of Treachery is another short story compendium, and this one is a bit of a mess. Most of the short stories within it chronologically take place before the heresy had even started, making it jarring to read so deep into the heresy series. Yes, the short stories are cool, but this book should have honestly been the first short story compendium, not one of the later ones. Still worth a read, but I would say read it just after the initial 5 books for the best results. Angel Exterminatus is a must read as it makes you really fall in love with Perturabo as it features him and Fulgrim on a quest together. Perty's level head clashing with Fulgrim's sluttiness. I would say you should read this as it helps show off what the traitors started doing after the Isstvan Dropsite massacre and the kind of shenanigans and side quests they went on that slowed down the heresy's progress. Betrayer is a great read. In a similar vein how Angel Exterminatus shows off what Perturabo and Fulgrim were doing post-massacre, this shows off what Angron and Lorgar were doing, as well as featuring some cool Gilliman action. It makes you realize Angron is a much more of a tragic character than he appears. I would say this is an essential read. Mark of Calth is skippable unless you love Ultramarines. It's a short story compendium that focuses on the aftermath of Know No Fear. It's overall solid and fun, but not necessary to the plot at all. Vulcan Lives kicks off a pretty controversial Salamanders subplot. If you like the Salamanders and Vulcan, it's worth reading, although it is a hard read since most of it is just Conrad Curse torturing the shit out of Vulcan in the most fucked up ways possible. It does however contain the legendary "It's also a hammer" scene. If you know, you know. Unremembered Empire is all about Imperium Secundus, and I would say it's an important read as it brings Gilliman, Sanguinius, the Lion, Vulcan, and even Conrad all together. If you skip this one, you would be doing yourself a massive disservice, not only as it's pretty key to the overall plot, but seeing Primarchs interact and conflict with each other is always a good time. Scars kicks off the White Scar's involvement in the heresy. Better late than never, and honestly, I can see why so many people become White Scar fanboys during the heresy. Their writing is great. However, if you have no interest in the White Scars, this is technically skippable, although I wouldn't recommend skipping it. Vengeful Spirit shows off Horus's invasion of Molech, a key world that contains the power-up he needs to be able to stand against the Emperor. It's a hectic war book featuring a lot of cool moments and epic last stands. It also shows off how deadly the traitors are and how devastating the corruption can be. I would say yes, you should read it as it directly progresses the plotline and features many traitor Primarchs and helps understand the traitors more. Damnation of Pythos is the most skippable book in the entire series and is genuinely disliked by many Warhammer fans. Now that doesn't mean you have to skip it, it just means that if you did, your life wouldn't change at all. It does feature some badass characters. Atticus genuinely seems like a war god reborn and is the most badass Iron Hand to ever live, and the ending does impact the plot a tiny bit in a future book, but overall it's very random and has little bearing on the rest rest of the series. Legacies of Betrayal is another short story compendium, thus it is skippable. However, it does feature a ton of short stories and dive into some of the most important space marines in the Heresy, and each short story is pretty quick, so I would say if you had to read a few of the compendiums, then Legacies of Betrayal should be one of them. Deathfire is a continuation of the Salamander subplot introduced by Vulcan Lives. If you read that, then you should read this. If not, then you can skip it. War Without End is another short story compendium. I can't really remember if this one was good or not, as it contains a shitload of short stories. Honestly, a good strategy would be to start reading, and if it's good, keep going, and if it sucks, then just skip to the next. Pharos is awesome. Seeing Night Lords being terrifying while also getting punished tickles my pickle, but it is skippable. It's basically just a continuation on one aspect of the Imperium Secundus plotline, and while awesome, isn't necessary unless you want to know more. It does, however, feature Alexis Pollux and Dantioc's bromance, which is almost enough to say it's completely worth it and essential. The Eye of Terror is a bit of a random one, another short story compendium with disjointed out-of-order short stories. However, it does feature Aurelian, which details Lorgar's fall to chaos during his pilgrimage to the Eye of Terror, among some other pretty cool plot points, so I would say it's worth a read, but probably should be read just after the first Heretic so it's less jarring. The Path of Heaven is a sequel to the first White Scars book, Scars. It details how the White Scars got to Terra. I would say if you read Scars, then read this. If you skipped Scars, then you could probably skip this, but I wouldn't, as the White Scars are dope as hell in the Heresy. The Silent War is a collection of short stories that details more about what Malcador has been doing with his knights errant during the Heresy. It's kind of like Space Marine James Bond, and it is quite enjoyable, but overall skippable if you aren't too interested in the knights errant plotline. Angels of Caliban wraps up most of the Dark Angel subplot and merges it more into the main storyline. You should probably read this even if you skip the first two Dark Angel books, as it contains the Lion's final showdown with Conrad Kurz, and it explains more about where Caliban stands on the loyalty scale, but if you do skip it, it's not the end of the world. However, you do not want to skip the Praetorian of Dawn. This is an incredible Imperial Fist novel, showing off Dawn's mighty prowess and mind as he goes toe-to-toe with Alpharius and the Alpha Legion. It's the first time the traitors attack the Sol system, and the ending is hectic. A must-read. Corax is a short story compendium that discusses what the Raven Lord is up to. If you skip Deliverance Lost, then you may as well skip this as well. Master of Mankind is an absolute must. I loved it. It shows off Custodians in all their glory, the Emperor in the most amount of depth we have seen him, and it details what the Emperor has been doing while his empire has been burning. It directly impacts the main storyline and gives a lot of context on how fuck shit actually is. Garo can be skipped. I love Garo. He's dope and he's important, but the whole Garo Knights Errant subplot is pretty skippable. However, it does go into a lot more detail about what Malcador has been doing during the Heresy to try impact it as much as he can, and man, he's been a busy little bee. Buzz buzz. Shattered Legions is another short story compendium that can be skipped if you didn't read the previous Shattered Legion books. I personally think the Shattered Legion subplot was dope, but its overall impact on the Heresy is pretty minor. The Crimson King details the aftermath of the fall of Prospero, as the Thousand Sons desperately try to gather up their Primarch's broken shards before he dies, whilst the Imperium tries to collect them for themselves to hopefully rebuild a new Loyalist Magnus that can help the Emperor get off the Golden Throne. It is skippable, but it's also a lot of fun, so if you like the Thousand Sons, I would definitely read it. Talon is a very dope book, so it's tragic to say that it's also extremely skippable. It's basically just one fuck-off massive tank battle, which is dope as hell, but it's such a self-contained story that its overall bearing on the Heresy is very minor. However, if you like Perturabo and the Iron Warriors or tanks, then you may as well go through it. Ruined Storm is essential as it details how Sanguinius is able to get to Terra and what happens to Guilliman and the Lion. This book is kinda connected to the Damnation of Pythos, as the Pythos book details the origins of this book's main villain, but it's not important enough of a detail that you need to go back and read Pythos. But yes, this is a must read, not just for its quality, but also for how it advances the plot. Old Earth is also an essential book. It's technically a continuation of the previous Salamander books that are skippable, however it details Vulcan's journey to Terra as well as progresses the Perpetual plotline, which although controversial, is essential to the main story. It brings the Salamander plotline into the main story and even helps wrap up the Shattered Legions plotline as well. Overall, a must read for storyline coherency. Burden of Loyalty is another short story compendium. At this point, you can make your own judgment call. If you've been enjoying the short stories, then read it. If you're speedrunning this series, then you can skip it. Wolfsbane is an interesting one. Although it covers why the Space Wolves aren't present during the Siege of Terra and features a pretty epic fight between Russ and Horus, you can actually skip it if you're just creaming to get to the Siege of Terra and you don't care much for the Space Wolves. Born of Flame is a Salamander's focused short story compendium, which you can skip if you skip the other Salamander subplot books. Slaves to Darkness, on the other hand, is pretty essential as it covers the plotline of bringing all the traitor Primarchs back together just before they're pushed on Terra. It dives into how dysfunctional the traitors are and why they haven't managed to win yet despite holding nearly all the cards, as well as the monumental effort it took to bring them together for the final battle. Great book, essential for the plotline. Heralds of the Sea Siege is a short story compendium, and although not essential, it's a great read as it helps you prepare for the Siege of Terra by covering various perspectives and small plot lines. It just fleshes out the lore a bit more before shit gets hectic, so I'd say it's worth it. Titan Death details a loyalist counterattack led by Sanguinius, in which the loyalists attempt to basically wipe out most of the traitor Titans alongside their own prior to the Siege of Terra, as humanity's birthworld will not survive a full-on Titan war. It explains why the amount of Titans on Terra ended up being pretty minimal, as about 95% of them died during this book. It features some awesome scenes and I would recommend it, but I can't yet quite list it as essential. The Buried Dagger is the last book before the Siege of Terra and covers the Death Guard's fall into becoming Plague Marines, as well as mostly wrapping up the last of the Knights Errant subplot. This may be controversial, but this book is skippable if you don't care too much about the Death Guard or the Malcador subplot, although it definitely helps to have read, as both the Death Guard and Malcador feature pretty heavily during the siege. As for the siege itself, every full novel is essential. Every single novella is skippable. The Sons of Selenar, Fury of Magnus, and Garo, Knight of Grey more or less are just finishing up various subplots. Sons of Selenar wraps up the Shattered Legions in their entirety, Fury of Magnus wraps up the Thousand Suns Fall to Chaos subplot, Garo wraps up Garo's subplot. If you have been reading every book, then yes, definitely read these as well, but they aren't essential. As for the rest of them, Solar War, Lost in the Damned, The First Wall, Saturnine, Mortis, Warhawk, Echoes of Eternity, and The End and Death Part 1, 2, and 3, all of these are must-reads. They are all fucking awesome. The best of them, other than The End and Death, is easily Echoes of Eternity. That book just doesn't slow down even for a second. Congrats, you just finished the Heresy. Now I did just finish Era of Ruin, and sadly it was actually pretty fucking shit. It wrapped up a few subplots in pretty unsatisfying, lame ways, whilst other short stories within it were just pointless self-contained stories. I could honestly say it was the most disappointing book of the entire series, which is a bit of a shame, but oh well. So that was my recommendations of what to read during the Horus Heresy. There is no wrong way to read the Heresy. I mean, unless you read it upside down or you read it while masturbating with a cheese grater, or something weird like that. However, you can pick and choose which novels to get through. My guide is basically what I recommend depending on what you like and how coherent you want the plot to be. If you enjoyed the video and you want to support the channel, then pick up the Big EV2. He is available for sale right now until the end of the month. Link is below. Enjoy this, go for more memes and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.